welcome to the meeting of the Backbench Business Committee for this afternoon. The chairman of the committee is away on an education visit, so the committee's asked me to chair the meeting once again. So the first application we've got is from Judith Cummins, Tim Farron, Peter Aldous on NHS dentistry. Over to you, Judith.
Thank you very much, Chair, and it's very nice to see you in your place. Peter sent his apologies because unfortunately he's got another meeting, but he did want to be here. This debate is supported by 40 members from 4 different parties, 25 Labour members, 7 Liberal Democrat members, 1 Green Party member and 7 Conservative members, so it's really cross-party. As it always is, we all know that this is one of the biggest subjects that ends up in our inbox, with so many people, so many constituents contacting us about access to NHS dentistry and the state of NHS dentistry. The Nuffield Trust, Health Watch England and the BDA and the Health and Social Care Committee have all called for the government to roll out a fundamental reform of the dental contract, and that's the key driver behind much of the exodus of dentists from the NHS. So the topic was last debated last April, and then again there was an opposition day debate on NHS dentistry in January 2024. However, it's very topical at the moment as it's got worse. I think we're all aware of how bad it is, but we're seeing 12 million people that were unable to access NHS dental care last year. That's 1 in 4 adults in England, and according to data published in April of this year, 64% of dental practice owners and 61% of associate dentists in England reported that they often think of leaving NHS dentistry. And so that also represents a clear and immediate threat to our constituents and access to patients, and also the long-term sustainability of the service in general. And worryingly, we see that only 1% of the 100 NHS practices contacted in England currently accept new patients. So there's real concern out there. It's right across the House. I think it'll be hugely supported, and I'm very grateful for you allowing me the time to present.
Anything to add, Tim?
Well, yeah, thank you, Chair. We really appreciate your time and that of the committee. I think all of us who spend any time in the presence of the public would say that this is comfortably a top 5 issue, if not more. In particular, we really hope that the committee will give us the time, because we think the House needs to scrutinise in particular later, more recent developments in this emerging issue, indeed crisis. In particular, the government's recovery plan. We're glad there is one, but we think the details of it deserve serious scrutiny. So, for example, there was a claim about new money, £200 million to support the recovery plan, but on scrutiny, the Secretary of State had to return and correct the record of the House to indicate that the new money was not existent. This was recycled. And so if we as members of all parties and our constituents are to have confidence, we want to know whether the resource exists, how much it is and where it is coming from. Likewise, there's been interesting statements encouraging to a degree that the recovery plan involves 500 new practices or practices taking on new NHS work as a result of the recovery plan, and we just love as a group of MPs, but we love the House as a whole, to be able to scrutinise that claim, interrogate it, and to bring in the experiences of our constituents, whether they be patients or indeed dentists or dentist staff across the board, to be able to see whether or not that claim is true or the extent to which it is, and also things, for example, much has been made of 15 mobile dental vans to encourage and improve access in rural communities. There are only 15 of these vans, and their capacity is 30,000 courses of treatment, set against 12 million who are unable to get NHS treatment at the moment. In short, roughly speaking, and it'll vary in different bits of the country, but about 50% of children have not had access to an NHS dentist in the last 3 years, over 2/3 of adults, and the knock-on effect is people doing DIY dentistry, people gaining succumbing to sepsis as a result of having done that. I think something like £80 million a year we're now spending, according to the BDA, on surgery involving general anaesthetic for children because of dental problems. And of course, those children waiting up to 2 years, and as a result, been on antibiotics during that time and becoming resistant to antibiotics later in life as a consequence. So I think the word crisis is used a lot. I think we have one when it comes to dentistry. I think there's a particular moment which may justify us having this debate, in that there is an NHS dentistry recovery plan from the government, and we'd like the opportunity for all members to be able to scrutinise it.
Okay, it's a very strongly subscribed debate, and obviously you've got a substantive motion that could divide the House. So therefore you will obviously be looking at chamber time. If we offered you Thursday the 13th of June, would that be acceptable to you?
I'm sure it would be.
I'm sure it would be. Thank you very much if you did. Thank you.
Kevin?
Thank you, Chair. It's put my cards on the table straight away. I think this is a compelling issue. It's right. There's high levels of interest. It clearly needs to be on the floor of the House, and you've clearly got a divisible motion that needs to be on the floor of the House. So I'll make that point. In starting to say, to sell me the need to have a debate. In terms of the actual motion, it talks about update on progress in 2 months' time. How do you envisage that update on progress being given, and exactly who to?
And I guess we'd expect the Secretary of State to make that update to the House. I imagine it might need to be a bit more than 2 months' time, wouldn't it, given that August would be the 2 month period. But we would expect there to be clear measurements on the number of new cases treated, the number of new dentists contracted from the beginning of the recovery plan, and indeed from the point that we'd had the debate.
And who would you expect? So you said it to be a report placed before the House, and then potentially followed up by a select
potentially,
committee?
well, indeed, by a select committee, or indeed, or a written and then oral statement in the House.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin.
Okay, thank you. No more questions? No? Thank you very much for your presentation. The clerks will obviously be in touch with you shortly.
We're really grateful. Thank you. Thanks.
The next application is from Tim Lawton on the Republic, or recognition of the Republic of Somaliland.
Thank you, Mr. Blackman. This is slightly more niche than dentistry in the UK, but it's a subject which hasn't really had an airing in this House. A number of colleagues have been to Somaliland recently. I was there with a colleague last month, the return from which rather hit the headlines in a way that I hadn't anticipated, given our relations with Djibouti next door, which may or may not feature in such a debate, but this is primarily on the recognition of Somaliland. Somaliland is the former British protectorate of British Somaliland. It's based on those borders. It broke away from what we know as Somalia back in 1991, has not received international recognition, although a few places have given it recognition. But it is a haven of peace and democracy in an otherwise rather turbulent region. And the Somalilanders are very keen to be recognised in the international community, and they have been taking many steps to try and encourage that, not least a recent memorandum of understanding with the Ethiopian government about giving them access and development of the port of Berberis, which is potentially going to be a bigger port than Djibouti and will be very important in the whole Gulf of Aden region. And that memorandum of understanding is being pursued at pace now, including many Somaliland British residents who are legal experts who are part of it, who we met on our recent trip. And the conditions of that MOU is that Ethiopia, if it's successful, will recognise formally Somaliland and will have access to the port and a naval base near it as well. And I think that could be a very important turning point for the way the world looks at Somaliland. But it's become fairly topical now because of what's going on the other side of the Red Sea with Yemen and the influence of the Houthis on shipping going through that very important and very busy waterway. So for us to have allies and stable allies in the Horn of Africa is of particular importance and attraction to the UK, the USA, and European allies as well. So hence, we want to start the ball rolling by our government taking Somaliland rather more seriously. It's so far declined to recognise Somaliland as the independent republic that it wants to be, and it's also failed to recognise the Memorandum of Understanding, even though it is with a very large economic player in that part of Africa that could be particularly game-changing for Somaliland and also very, very important to Ethiopia itself, who is another important ally in the region. So I very easily, in a very short space of time, got 15 colleagues from and there are others since we submitted this from the SNP in particular. So it's been supported by Labour, Conservative, SNP, DUP, Lib Dem colleagues across the board. This isn't a partisan issue at all. And we are keen that it will be on a substantive motion. The fairly raw motion that I put down is a starter for 10, but the government may get slightly alarmed at that, so we'd be prepared possibly to negotiate on a requesting the government to set out a timetable and criteria for the recognition of Somaliland, if that wouldn't frighten the horses quite so much. But ideally, would like to have something that will send a clear signal that we think Somaliland should be taken seriously, and the UK, as the former protectorate, has a very key role to play in that. So, and there's also a large Somaliland community in the UK, spread across particular cities like Cardiff, Birmingham. Everybody we met in Somaliland seemed to come from Birmingham, and Liverpool, and other parts of the UK. So there's a substantial part of the population with links to Somaliland.
Can I just ask you, what's the status of Somaliland in the Commonwealth? Presumably it's not recognised as a state, so it's not part of the Commonwealth.
It's not recognised by the UN, by the Commonwealth, or other international authorities. It has diplomatic relations with Taiwan, and potentially full recognition with Ethiopia, depending on the outcome of the MOU.
Okay. As you say, it's a niche application. It's got a motion which is potentially divisible. If this committee were minded to, would you be able to take the second slot on Thursday, the 6th of June?
6th of June?
Yeah.
Right. The 13th of June, I was going to say I definitely can't because I'm not here, but the 6th of June, let me check. That's the Thursday as well, isn't it, I suppose?
Yes, it is, yeah.
6th of June.
We only get Thursday allocations, so for the chamber.
I very possibly. It's not ideal, but we would work around it, I'm sure. Is there another option after that?
Well, after that would be the 13th of June, which you've already said that you can't make. Right. And then after that it gets pushed back to the queue.
That's for the chamber, isn't it, as well? So
yes.
We would. I mean, I'm not fussy about whether we have something in Westminster Hall as well, if that were more.
Well, Westminster Hall would be. You wouldn't have the motion. It's just.
It wouldn't be a substantive motion. True. Yes, of course. Yeah.
So, anyway, I mean, open to other colleagues for other questions. Any questions? No. No. Well, the clerks will be in touch with you. I mean, obviously, because it's the week after the recess. We're quite keen on getting that slot filled. So if you can't take it, then clearly we're going to have to consider what else to do. Right?
I'm sure we can work some things around it. Sure. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Next up is Andrea Jenkins. Andrea.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Keep hoping I can do it without my glasses, you know.
All of us.
Absolutely. So I'm talking in support of my application for a debate on the true costs associated with meeting our net zero targets. Now, I've secured support from both the government and opposition parties. As you can see, 10 Conservatives, 7 opposition, which make up of 1 Labour, 4 DUP, 1 Reform and 1 Independent. I've also secured a former Cabinet Minister as a signatory as well. I do declare an interest because I'm an unpaid Director of Net Zero Watch, which I took on last year. But I think this debate would allow members across the House to consider the true costs associated with meeting our net zero targets in terms of both the economy and society. Now, personally, I don't think Parliament has had sufficient opportunity to consider the implications of what meeting our net zero obligations means for the ordinary person, who is quite often struggling to make ends meet during the cost of living crisis. And also the impact on industry. If I can just give an example of that, Mr. Chairman. I'm a Yorkshire MP, and we've got Drax in Yorkshire. And they made the business decision trying to meet the net zero targets by actually overhauling their whole system. They now import, cut down trees in Canada, import pellets to burn in the UK. So it seems quite sometimes bizarre decisions are being made at this push, and quite nonsensical ones. And I want to know what is the impact on the taxpayer as well. But also think about the unforeseen consequences of making too many drastic decisions too quickly. Just one example of this is a boiler tax policy, which I'm sure is well intentioned at the time by government, but if you it'll actually put the cost of a new boiler up by £120. And to a consumer who's already struggling, I think really we need to actually look at the true cost and the impact on the consumer. And that's it. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Andrea. And 4 other colleagues come in. There's obviously a slight concern because you've got 1 Labour member.
Yes.
Whilst you've got other opposition members, have you made any other attempts to get Labour members to?
No, I just I mean, there's not many Labour members who speak up on this thing, so I just searched and I just found 1, to be honest with you. So I did try looking. I looked in all the Hansards, etc., who spoke up on it. Yeah.
Right. Obviously, you've asked for a Tuesday slot,
if possible, please.
And we're assuming this would be the answering department will be energy security and net zero.
Yes, please. Thank you.
Which would lend itself to the potential offer of a date on the 4th of June. That's Tuesday the 4th of June.
Perfect.
Okay. Colleagues, any other questions?
No, that's fine.
Okay, clerks will be in touch with you.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Thank you. And thank you.
Finally, but by no means least, Slane Saxby.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you for seeing me.
Steve?
So I'm here to put forward a debate on floating offshore wind and AR6. AR6 is the next leasing round to assign the contracts for difference. So obviously I chair the all-party parliamentary group for the Celtic Sea, so we've been very involved in floating offshore wind and previously been here to have a debate on getting floating offshore wind afloat. Obviously, the leasing round that came through last year, not a single floating offshore wind project bid into it because the strike price for the leasing round was too low. And there is now a grave concern as we head into this leasing round, which has now closed. So the commercial bids have literally gone in the last 10 days. However, bids outperform the budget fourfold. So we are looking at a situation whereby we have projects, obviously, that were unsuccessful in the last leasing round, wanting to bid into this one. And there is a growing view across the industry that if we don't change the budget in particular, but possibly even the structure of how we look at floating offshore wind, that we have 3 different regions. There's 2 Scottish projects. There's the project in Blythe, and there's the projects down in the Celtic Sea, and the MPs from all those regions are supporting the application, that if we don't extend the budget or treat each region as a budget pool, that we're going to lose whole regions of wind. And as we know, the wind blows in different directions in different bits of the country. And I know there's a concern with wind power that the wind doesn't blow all the time, but you obviously need to optimise your chances of that by having some in each place. And there is a real risk. We had a late entrant project into this leasing round, which would take the entire budget, which would mean the other 3 smaller projects who couldn't bid last time will not be able to bid at all. So there's a lot of complexity around this. I have already spoken with ministers who know I'm here today. But I do think it's an important debate to have on the floor of the House. There is real support for this technology. We're committed to huge amounts of it going out, but the current way the leasing round is working, we're potentially looking at actually entire regions dropping out of the process at this point in time. And I need on my application to apologise to Liz Savile-Roberts because I do know she's applied, not Labour.
Okay, thank you very much for that presentation. Now you've made a full application for Westminster Hall on Tuesday or Thursday or the Chamber. The earliest date we could offer you would be the 23rd of May, i.e. In Westminster Hall. That'd be next week.
And is that straight after the potholes?
Well, no, because potholes will be in the Chamber.
Oh, potholes is in the Chamber.
Yeah. So floating wind, if we were to offer it to you, would come. There are 2 slots. Remember, they now start at 12:30 and 2 o'clock. So you'd get the 2 o'clock slot, which would finish by 3:30.
Okay. I'm inclined to say yes.
Right. Thank you. Any questions from our colleagues?
No, I was just going to add that the wind always blows in Scotland.
I feel it always blows where I live as well, to be honest. So.
It's an ill wind. Anyway, so can I thank you for your presentation, and the clerks will be in touch with you shortly.
Thank you very much for seeing me. Thank you.
Okay. Order. That concludes the public business. We now go into.
The proceeding has ended. The proceeding has ended. The proceeding has ended.